here is pretty normal. Some sort of whose document it is, what it is. In terms of types of documents, you usually see procedures, work instructions, and forms. As you go down that level of hierarchy, procedures, work instructions, and forms, you go up in the level of detail. So procedures have the least amount of detail, forms have the highest amount of detail.
Oh,
Kind of as you go down. As you go from,
so there could be more detail?
There
It's
could
just
be
in
more
the document
detail.
we're not looking at.
right. So that's one thing. The second thing to know is there's been a major shift in ISO standards recently. And where it used to be very document focused, now it's not. Okay, so there used to be a paradigm where people documented everything.
Okay.
And now there's very few documents required. In 50,001, energy planning is required to be documented, and internal audit, and that's it. There are no other required procedures. SEP adds two more. They add records and procedure, they add records and documents, and they add corrective and preventive action. So those are the only required documents. Now, there are a lot of records, like the measurement plan is a record. Management review is a record. If they come from a background where they already had a management system in place and it's been there for a while, they will tend to have procedures like what you're looking at. If they've worked with anybody like me or anybody who teaches the new methods, this won't exist because there is no requirement for it. So the first thing I will ask when I get a document like this is, why do you have it? Who uses it, and why do you have it? Because if the only people who use this document is the purchasing guys, and they are competent to do their job, they don't use this document. So as a CP, what does that do to your audit risk? It raises it, because if they're not using it, they're not updating it. And if they're not updating it, it's not current. So when the auditor comes in, if you have a document, we hold you to it. No matter what it says or when it was written. You say, this is my procedure for purchasing. I'm going to hold you to it. So as a CP, if more than one person does it, they don't do it very often, or they have temporary personnel who might be in that function, documents are a good thing. If they have highly qualified personnel, like PhDs in an R&D lab, giving them a document is like creating an audit trail for somebody to shoot fish in a barrel, because they aren't going to use it and they aren't going to follow it.
So, I'm sorry, I'm maybe not following. So as the CP, you're fine with not having this procedure in a document as long as you can walk up to purchasing and say, what do you do?
Yeah,
Okay,
pretty much.
okay. Well,
Now,
that's nice.
because I'm only going to be asking the people in purchasing what they do.
What they do.
I'm not going to be asking the guy out in operations how he purchases stuff, because that's not his job. You can only audit people on their direct responsibilities.
Right.
So, the first thing I would have asked in this particular case is, why do you have this document and who uses it besides you?
Right.
And if the answer is nobody else uses it,
Delete it?
then the first recommendation I would have is get rid of it, because it doesn't address your needs. Is anything about energy in the purchasing document? Yeah. So, the first thing is, can I get rid of it? First question. Okay. If you cannot get rid of it, they want it, and sometimes people like them, they're a crutch. Okay, let's see what we can do with this document now that you have it. So then I start looking at the format of the document and going from there. So here, the way they've got this, this top part is their document control features. It gives you a date. So from this date forward, these rules apply. This date backwards, they do not. So from here forward, these rules apply. This has been revised a lot. It's got 10 revisions, and it's numbered. If they numbered it according to the standard numbers, tell them not to do that. I will guarantee you one thing. I change those numbers. I change them every time I revise the documents. We are required to revise the documents every 5 years. So, in fact, on Thursday, I will show you the draft version of 50,001. This is not one of its numbers. So if you're using the numbers in the standard, don't. Use their department number. Make up a number. It doesn't have to have a number. As long as you can identify it, you have a file naming structure that IT gave you and you're using, you don't need an ISO number, okay? But if you have to have one, use something you got from their IT department, which is usually a department number followed by some sort of identifier. That's going to be much more effective long-term. Otherwise, every time the standard changes, you've got to change all these numbers. That is a useless exercise of wasted time. Okay, so first thing not to do. Okay, it's approved by Dan Brown, and he approved it on this date. This would cause me to go, really? Let's look at that process. I don't know very many organizations who can get something approved the same day they wrote it. So that would give me pause. This has a very old layout. It's got a purpose, a scope, and then process and responsibilities. It's an old format. There's nothing wrong with it. So the first thing I'll do is look at this. This is about the impact of quality. So it tells me right away that there are no energy considerations, and it's probably going to be a long day. And I'm going to have writer's cramp. It tells you what it applies to. It does apply to logistics, support services, consulting services, products, pieces, and parts. So in terms of what it applies to, this part is fine. When I come down and look at it, it's got words in here that no good editor should ever have allowed through, like all. We never use concrete words, all, always, none, never. Don't use any of those kind of words in an ISO document. They have no value. All vendors must be on the approved vendors list. Okay, so for credit card purchases, show me your approved vendors list. It shoots this right out the window. It serves no value to have the word all there. The only time that's true is that there always is an exception. So all the auditor has to do is find the exception. So that's just a writing style thing for a ZP, so do that. They have a vendors list. This is an example of an organizational requirement. There's no ISO requirement to do that. They have added requirements. 80% of your nonconformities come from the requirements you add. 80% of the nonconformities come from requirements you add. So if you're going to add something, be sure there's a reason for it. What value does the approved vendors list have to procurement? I guarantee you not one. Because when they want to go buy something, where do they go? Open up their computer, and their vendors are in their computer. You don't need another list. So who do you buy from? If they're in the computer, I can buy from them. If they're not in the computer, this is how we approve them. You don't need an ABL. That's going to be shooting fish and barrels. All I'm going to have to do is say, run me a report of the vendors on your vendor database and show me your list. For everyone that doesn't match, you have non-conforming. This is not a difficult audit. Okay, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. Yeah. Don't do stupid things. That's a stupid thing.
But would you audit that, because given it's not required by ISO 50001,
If you have it in your system, I have to audit it. I have no choice.
even though it's not required by ISO, even if it's not.
The documents come from 5 places. The standard requires it, there's only 2. You require it. This is one you require. 'Cause
So you
put it
will
in.
audit the documents that you require as well?
Uh-huh. In addition to those 2, you can have a requirement you've agreed to. So for example, SEP is voluntary, but if you agree to it, I'll also audit SEP requirements because you've agreed to them. But SEP is a voluntary program. So I audit those that are required, those that are legally required, those that you determined are necessary, those you agree to even though they're voluntary. So I audit a whole bunch of things in its entirety. So for SEP, I'm auditing 50,001, 50,021, the MMV protocol, the scorecard, the SEPSERT protocol. I'm also auditing according to 50,003 and 50,028, plus anything the organization added. So I have 8 sources I'm pulling from as an auditor for SEP. My point here is very simple. Don't add something if you don't need it. This is a case where somebody thought it would be a good idea, and so far what I can tell you is I have audit findings. And I'm not going to have to try very hard to get them. You should at least make the auditor work for the audit findings they write. Okay, that's your job, to make the auditor work for the audit finding. In this case, they're not making me work very hard. So, I'm going to have hand cramps and I'm not going to be happy. All right, so upon completing this evaluation, which they have one for everybody on this list, so now I have another record I can go ask for, and another thing that is not required by the standard. Their database, SAP, JD Edwards, whatever they go into to order stuff has their vendors in there. There's nothing wrong with that as their record and as evidence that they've approved them. The criteria may be documented, and it could be in a screen inside JD Edwards that they click, this one met this one met that, and then they go in there. It could be a separate file. They want a paper copy of that, fine. I don't care about that. All the standard says is you have to have a mechanism to communicate with them about energy. I don't have to approve them. So all this whole process has been added. Show me your approval form for Georgia Power. I guarantee you they don't have it. Okay, because this is from quality. So you can see how easy this is going to be to shoot. So as you come down here and you look at the selection, this is the selection that they've set up. None of these have to do with environmental. All of it has to do with quality. So we don't have any environmental or energy terms in here that I can latch onto. Here, if they had environmental terms, I would give them the benefit of the doubt, and then I would take the responsibility to prove it didn't include energy. Okay, so you always give the auditee the benefit of the doubt. So even if they glummed in environmental, because environmental might include energy, I would give them the benefit of the doubt from the document, and then I would have this further discussion. But they don't have that in here, so I have nowhere to go. They give you your authorization in order. They have a numbering system, which is a hierarchical numbering system, no big deal. They have a revision table, very common approach, no big deal, fairly useful, very common approach you'll see for document controls. From document control, they've got what they need, except they have a number, QP 4.6% company. They also have a lot of requirements in here that aren't in the standard that they've added, in which they're not necessarily going to be able to meet.
So again, this is quality, but they had no need to give it to you at all.
But if
Because
it's in
there's
their, if it's in their system, it's auditable. I have to audit it.
Got it, but I mean, so they should have known, they should say something about environmental, energy, whatever. It doesn't. But then they still reflexively thought, oh, okay, here's purchasing policy, here you go.
And 9 times out of 10, what happens to you as a CP is you go in and you say, do you have anything about purchasing related to energy? And they say no, because they don't. Then when you go in to do the internal audit, first thing the auditor usually asks is, do you have a procedure that applies to your work? Yes. Can I see that, please? And now you have the procedure. And the CP is standing there going, because now I'm going to audit to the procedure, because the procedure covers their work. How do you know it should be controlled document? If it tells about their work, it should be controlled. That's the simplest way to put it. So is there something that tells you about how to do your work? Yes. Can I see that, please? Yes. Could be computer screens. It could be written documents. It could be a combination of the two. It could be photographs. It could be videos. There is no limitation on the media type used. So document doesn't mean paragraph form. A lot of documents in production are samples. So they'll have a board that says this is good, this is bad. That's a document. Okay, so a document could be a computer screen. It's not a piece of paper and paragraph. so now I've got another document that they wrote. I'm going to make a couple of points here. Notice that this does not have the approved date down here like the other one did. So now I have a document control question. Okay, so as an auditor, I don't have to know their system. I have to find differences. I'm looking for what's different. It's like the pictures, 5 to 10 things that are different. Same thing here. This is different. So this would create a document control question. Why is there not a date here? Is it required? Show me your procedure. This one also gets revved a lot. It's date 2010. We're in 2012. It hasn't been revised in 2 years. That's also going to give me a document control question. The other one had been revised within a year. It was 2011. We're in 2012 for the purposes of the case study. This has been 2 years. Automatic question. How often do you review your documents? Annually is fine. 2 years is fine. They can't go more than 3 without at least taking a look at it. But they could do that, for example, through internal audit. They don't have to have a change in date on the document. But how did they review or update this information? All right, so I've got a lot of stuff on design, and I can just scan through this without even reading it, and this is about product development. This is a scaled down version of stage gate. It is not anything to do with energy. It also doesn't have anything to do with facilities, equipment, systems, or processes. And those words aren't even showing as I scan.
Something like this is just apply for their own product.
Yeah. And that's literally what I'll do when I get a document. I scan it about like I did just there. And I look for some key things. It's not there. This isn't the right thing for me. So now I'm going to say, okay, this is about product design, and I appreciate you sharing this with me. I find that very value added. I think, it's very nice that you have that process in place. I'd like to talk about who does the management when you decide to move equipment around. See where we go. What happens when a new piece of equipment comes in? Who would deal with that? And I'll ask them about 4 questions, 4 different examples, find out if I can get different people involved or if I'm going to end up in the same person's office in all the cases. What happens if you need to replace equipment in kind? So a compressor goes down and you need to replace it. Who would be responsible for it? When that comes in, putting it where it needs to go. It could be a combination of somebody in-house and a contractor, and that's what I'm trying. So design can include how they manage their contractors. So that's one of the things I'm trying to pick up there. So I picked a process where it might be done by an outside electrician or an outside mechanic. So when you ask questions as an auditor, you sample across type to get depth and see if the process is working in multiple situations. So in this case, this isn't going to be useful to me at all, and I'm going to need to talk to other people. Sometimes people will give you things to try and be helpful, but they don't know what you're looking for. Don't take it as anything other than that. Just ask them, this is great, thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask some different questions. I'm going to set this aside for a moment. Let's talk about this, and if you could tell me who does this, and this. Ask one question at a time. Don't ask all 4 at once. You'll confuse them and yourself. Okay. Keep the questions simple and in plain language.
Again, because this is product design, it's not exactly what you were looking for, but it's not the same type of thing where it's document about your work, so you don't have to pick this one apart.
There's no requirement for design document, but this is about, so if they did hand me one, my first question would be, who uses it and why do you have it? And that's on the CP side. Now from the auditor side, once they have it, I hold them to it.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 faces here. I've got the auditor face and I've got the consultant face. When I'm working with CPs or trying to help a company implement, my first question for any piece of paper or any computer screen that has the word procedure or work instruction is, why? Who uses it? How often do they use it? Who updates it? If you can't tell me the answer to those questions, I'm wanting that sucker to leave it. If they're not using it, they're not updating. If they're not updating it, it's an audit nightmare.
At the end of this, it showed revisions, I guess 3 through 8. Is that a problem that it didn't show 1 and 2?
No, There's no revision history requirements. It's got some revisions on here. It's got at least the last one. I'm good to go. Their procedure may have changed.
I see one of the revisions, they removed the effective date.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen. In document control, my general rule of thumb for you, keep it as simple as possible. So things like effective dates, they're not helpful, because then I've got a written date, I've got an approved date, I've got an effective date, I've got this. Here it is, and this is what we use. Okay, and here's where you go get it. You don't need any dates on there. What procedure do you use? I use the one on the iDrive. How do you know it's the right one? Because it's the only one I can open. This is not rocket science. That is control. That's all you need to show. What happens when you don't need this one anymore? They put a new one in there. What happens to this one? No idea. I can only open the right one. Perfect control. Use what you have. The more creative and more ways you try to demonstrate wonderfulness, the more audit problems you create. So just don't do that. Don't do it. Now you will get consultants who will tell you, no, you need paper procedures, and they need to be beautiful, and they need to have these 27 features. No, they don't. That isn't what the ISO standard requires. It does require the document control to be effective, and the more complicated you make it, the less effective it's going to be, and the more I'm going to have to write findings, and it's going to put me in a really bad mood. Don't do that. Put your auditor in a bad mood.
So for everything else other than the two procedures that you said are mandatory, but we have a lot of these, this needs to be recorded, right? Like say.
That's records.
So.
That's a record.
So what is there a minimum criteria for record? Can it just be like an email sent out to?
Records can be anything. It's just evidence that something happened. It could be an email. It could be a form that's been completed. It could be an entry in the computer. So the record I approved the vendor, if I have to have a vendor approval process, could be their name is on that list. It doesn't have to be anything else.
But it needs to be something that you can look at, right? And not just, you talk to purchasing for this project, did you consider anything? It's not just they saying, yes, we consider it, right? They need to show something. In the
Usually
form.
record is an entry of some sort, yes.
Some proof.
Some proof. It's the evidence that some event occurred. So it could be an email, it could be a logbook. I see a lot of logbooks, especially in maintenance. I see a tremendous number of logbooks. It doesn't have to be anything special. It doesn't have to be any, your goal as a CP is to find something they already have that they can use to meet that requirement, not to create something new. Creating new stuff should be your absolute last option, and it should be with kicking and screaming feet. Why are you creating something new? You're already creating a model they don't have. You're already collecting a lot of information they didn't do before. So adding in more stuff on top of that it's going to create a challenge for you in an audit. And if they were already buying stuff, they had to have a way to know they could buy from that company already. What were they doing now? How do you know you can go down to Lowe's and buy something? Well, because that's one of the approved companies for our credit card. How do you know that? Well, Lori has a list in her office of where I can go. Boom, you're done. You don't need anything else. They've got it. Okay, Lori, where's that list? Well, it's right here in SAP, and it's this credit card list right here. You don't need anything else. Don't try and create something if you can find anything that might serve that purpose.
In this case, purchasing though, where they don't talk about energy, they do have to do something.
They have to do something. And now the question is, what do they have I can leverage as my record? So maybe they need to, go in, and it's not easy to separate out all the vendors who deal with their SEU, the spray dryer. So maybe they send something to every supplier. So she may be able to go, Lori may be able to go into the database and pull up an email that says, here's where we sent that email to all of our vendors, and we send this out every year. And you can see that in their settings for SAP. Works fine. Or we selected these 11 suppliers. Well, how did you do that? Well, George is our energy manager. he gave me a list of 11 people, and I sent it to those 11 people. Well, how did George get that list? I don't know, go ask George. Lori doesn't have to know, George does, you know, and that works just fine.
Yeah, could you please repeat, what's the two documentation requirement for ISO?
Energy planning and internal audit.
And what,
Internal audit
internal audit?
and energy planning. Now, energy planning can be multiple documents because energy planning contains legal and other requirements, energy review,
Yeah,
EMPIs, baselines, objective targets, and action plans. So it could be 5 documents, it could be 1. But energy planning, all of 4.4 has to be documented.
Okay.
Whether they do it as a single document or a series is their choice.
Gotcha. What is the two documentation added by SCP?
The 2 added by SCP, one is corrective and preventive action,
Say it again?
corrective and preventive action,
Okay.
and the other one is, I think it's documents and records, but let me check. It may just be records. Get the right standard here. It's records. Yeah, you have to have a records procedure.
Records.
Yeah, it's not documents and records, it's just records.
Records procedure for corrective and preventive.
No, you need a records procedure and a corrective and a preventive action procedure.
What is records procedure?
So records procedure would address how I'm going to deal with the requirements for records under the ISO standard. And under the ISO standard, what it says is that for each record, I have to identify certain things. Those things are how I'm going to basically manage that information. So your energy data, for example, is a record. So for my consumption data, my utility bills, how long am I going to keep a utility bill? What am I going to do with it when I get rid of it? Who has access to it? And where do you find it? That's your basic records control. So, for example, I may consider energy data confidential. So Pete may have access to it because he's one of my managers who needs to know energy information. But he may not have access to it. That would be in my records control information.
So that records control documentation can include all different type of records, because I guess the
Yeah.
procedure can be very different for utility bills or the records for maintenance, I guess.
Exactly, exactly. Typically what people will do, rather than listing every record, is they'll list buckets or types. So all records in SAP are dealt with this way. All records in Maintenance Pro are dealt with this way. All records in paper form are dealt with this way.
Yeah.
So maybe all of my paper records go to Iron Mountain after a year and they get burned or shredded or whatever after 3 years. Maybe all my computer records get backed up weekly, they go to offsite monthly, and they get purged after 5 years because we toss the tapes. So they tend to do types of records. The other thing is if they're a corporate entity, there's always a corporate records procedure. And they'll just say we follow corporate record procedure. The one thing they can't do is violate legal requirements. So Pete says, I'm going to keep all of my information on my fuel for 3 months, because that's all I needed. And then it goes into my energy review tool, and I'm going to toss these records. Except you have a permit that says he's going to keep that for 5 years. He can't get rid of it after 3 months, because you have to have it for 5 years, because it's in the permit. So you can't violate a legal requirement. But other than that, the organization makes their own determination of record retention. Okay, so let's do operational control before we do lunch. And remember, this is not operational control, this is,
Operational and maintenance.
yes, maintenance. Don't forget maintenance, because the auditor's certainly not going to forget. If they have another management system, maintenance may not have ever been audited before. So when you do your internal audit, give them some extra time to get some practice in being audited. Maintenance people are by nature problem solvers. So they like to tell you things. So we have to train them on how to be audited. It takes a little more time.
Do they like to tell you things just because nobody else has asked for them, or because they
Most people
tend to be that way?
don't go visit maintenance very often.
Exactly.
When they do, it's like, I need this running in 20 minutes.
Right.
So they're not used to people sitting down and asking them information and trying to have a conversation with them and engaging them and asking for their opinions and viewpoints and asking to see things from them. That's just not how they're normally dealt with. So it's a new experience. By nature, they are problem solvers, so they like to give lots of information. That's just the nature of a problem solver personality. So we have to work with that, and we have to help them overcome that. You don't have to train management very often because they talk and they're post-it note mentality. They're the post-it note people. So if it's longer than a post-it note, it's not going to stick in their head or in their conversation. So even if they're going to speak in snippets, you don't usually have to train them too much on how to be audited. They typically do very well. Operational people, if they've been there a short time, typically do very well. If they're long timers, you got to train them.
Why not?
Because they will tell you about every job they've ever held in the company. And you don't want them doing that during an audit. You want them answering what they were asked and only what they currently do. Focused. So operational and maintenance control. Basically, you have to evaluate and make sure there's appropriate operational and maintenance controls for all of the SEUs. This applies to SEUs. So we're going to be focused in on the SEUs. So in this case, for the dryer, which is an SEU, we would want to know the operational controls and the maintenance. It's not the operation and maintenance of every piece of equipment in the building. It's the ones related to the SEUs. We want to make sure that they already know what those are, that they're managing those, have records of those, and communicating those. For SEUs, there are certain things. It's kind of like a if-then situation. If it's an SEU, then you have to do these things. You have to have an operational control. You have to consider it in procurement. You have to have measuring, monitoring, and analysis. You have to consider it when you set your objectives and targets. You must have competency and awareness for the people who work in this area. Your control could be the use of trained personnel. So your operational control in the case of refrigerant activities could be because they have a license in refrigeration. Okay? It may not be. But it could be that you have an apprentice-style program. So the operational control could be, well, they can work on these types of tasks when they're at this level, when they're in L2, they can work at these things when they're in L5, and they can do these kind of things when they're in L10, and here's how you go from being in L2 to being in L5 to being in L10. That could be your operational control. Okay, so operational controls can take many forms. Maintenance, this is a fun area to think about because a lot of times people will say, oh, we control that by maintenance. We manage that through maintenance. And there's one poor guy down in maintenance who, as far as I can tell, has a to-do list that's about 10,000 things long every single day, and then he's only getting half of it done. So maintenance has to prioritize things. Energy is not currently on their prioritization matrix. Okay? Their priorities go, what's broken, what's about to break, what people are yelling about, and then it goes from there. They may have some predictive or preventive schedules, they may not. One of the first things we ask to see in maintenance is print out your maintenance work orders for the day and show me, you might pick something that's on the list for today, so let's say the compressors are on the list for today. All right, I see compressors are on your maintenance. Compressor 2 and 3 is on your maintenance work orders for today. Yes. Can you pull up the work order history for compressors 2 and 3? I see that they get this work order printed out every 6 months. Show me where that work order was last completed So it may be printed out every 6 months, but it may only be completed every 9. What is the requirement? How often do you have to do it? How often are you doing it? How is that evaluated? That is a part of the effectiveness of the control. Is it working? Okay. Show me the breakdown history on compressor 2 and 3. Most of the maintenance work order systems can pull all these reports for you. It's not that hard to do. So, they need to have op and maintenance controls for SEUs. They need to have criteria for this equipment. All right, let's go look at the spray dryer. What are the criteria for operating this? That criteria for an energy perspective could include the loading information. We only run it when it's 3/4 full or better. It could include the temperature profile. Well, we used to just turn it on and let it run for 20 hours, but now we run program number 3. Okay, so it could be a particular set of time or temperatures that they're hitting. Controls could also be in terms of the size or style of the material that goes in there. So let's switch to hotels for a moment. Well, I have 5 commercial washers and dryers, and I have washer and dryer 1 and 2 set up for towels. I have 3 and 4 set up for sheets, and I have 5 set up for comforters and covers. Because they get washed at different temperatures and they get dried for different times. So this allows me to maximize my laundry productiveness, and it also maximizes energy efficiency because I'm not washing everything at the same temperature or drying them at the same temperature. Simple example of criteria. Maintenance people sometimes have this criteria in their head, so pulling that out can be a challenge. So if you go talk to somebody about how they manage the motors, they just say, I've been doing this for 20 years.
So for this one, do we need to require the records for the?
You're going to have records, and the records are probably going to be in the work order maintenance system. But it is just going to say that they serviced the motor. What was the criteria for the motor is in their head, and they're competent to do their job. Getting them to be able to verbalize that is your challenge.
So I guess the criteria should just be the vocal words?
Yeah, it's going to be them telling you what they did. But they've got to be able to verbalize it. They can't say, well, it's just looking to make sure it's a good motor and it's running right. That's not criteria.
So it does not need to be on a written?
No, it doesn't need to be written. He can say, well, I'm going to check to see. You know, I might get something as fancy as the vibration analysis. I might get something much less fancy, like, well, I'll look to see how much she wobbles. I'll look to see what her pitch is. I'll look to see, you know, how many hours it's been running. And I'll look to see if she's sounding funny. That's criteria. It's not fancy, but it's criteria. I could get something completely different. I could get, well, every X number of run hours, we do a rewind. Every Y number of run hours, we do a vibration test. Here are my results. It's going to depend on the complexity of the organization. What I can't get and can't use as criteria, well, I just look to see it's still working. That's not criteria. Go, no go is not criteria. Okay? What is it about the motor you're checking? Are you at least looking to see, you know, if it needs lube, or if it, you know, if it's smoking, or, you know, you're looking for basic runnability here. They've got to be able to verbalize that. And if they've been maintenance in that company for the last 15 years, and they've been working on this for the last eight months, that's like asking them, well, why is it green? That's what you're asking that person. And so you have to find a way to get into their world. And then you've got to find a way to be able to help them express that during an audit. Because you're literally asking them, what's the color green? What do you mean, what do I look for? I look at it, make sure it's okay. And they probably have a checklist in their head that's, you know, 45 things long. So a better way to go about that might be, when you're training a new person to look at a motor, what things do you ask them to look at?
That's a good question.
As an auditor, that's my job. And I will do that. So will most other auditors. As a CP, you've got, if you're dealing with Bubba, who's been there for 15 years and really knows his stuff, you're going to have to find a way to help him communicate to an auditor. So you might want to say, well, you know, if somebody outside asks you that, you might want to tell them what you would train a new person to look at. Or if you got a new motor in, how would it be different from this one? What kind of things would you look for? I see that this unit was replaced 6 months ago. This one's been here for 10 years. What's different about what you look at for these two motors when you're doing your evaluation? Also a good audit question. Because there will be different things they look for as the unit ages. So think about that when you are looking at this. It doesn't have to be written. Ask the right people. People who don't know are the directors and managers. People who do are in the maintenance department, and they may be contractors. Find out and manage that process in terms of how do people talk to the contractors. The other thing you have to make sure of is union requirements to talk to certain staff. Different states have different laws. Georgia's a right to work, so we don't typically have too many union issues here. For example, I audit out in California. I can't talk to the maintenance staff without a union rep there. I have to have the union steward with me. So I have to make sure that's in my audit plan. As a CP, if you're asking them about their job, you will as well. You need to know that. You also need to be prepared for that during an audit so you can have the right people there. Because in an audit, if I told you this was my plan and you didn't make the appropriate arrangements, it's a nonconformity and I'm your bond. So as a CP, a part of your job is also finding out what those hurdles are to audits and making sure they're eliminated. So that includes, do I need this union steward? Is there a place where we require security to access these parts of the building? Are there places where we only have temps who speak Vietnamese? Okay, what are your situations and how do you deal with this? So communication requirements is a big part of it. What is the evidence that they're doing this according to the criteria they have established? You can't get the criteria out of them, you can't figure out what this record is going to be. Usually it's in the work order system. Find out what kind of reports the work order system will and will not generate. You may need an external report generating software to be successful in maintenance, such as Crystal Reports. Because the maintenance software may not be able to generate things like the last time this particular piece was down, the difference in the criteria for piece A versus piece B. You may need an actual reporting piece to do some of that. They may use logbooks. Those are handwritten. Do yourself a favor. See if you can actually read any of them.
How many times will you externally audit a company before you just give up on them? I mean, has that ever happened where you're just like,
No, they pay for the audit in advance, so
Okay.
they've already paid for it.
so they're clearly, yeah. And how many times, what's the most you've had to go and audit a company before they actually get approved?
If they're paying for it, usually it doesn't happen much. I've killed off maybe 2 or 3 stage 1s.
Okay.
Because they really weren't ready. I've turned about 10 or 12 stage 2s into a stage 1.
Okay.
I don't tell them that we're not doing anything, I'm just, if
Yeah.
you're not ready, this is now a stage 1.
Got it.
And then we're gonna call it a day.
Okay.
But generally speaking, the pass rate is actually quite high.
Okay. Okay.
It's actually quite high. The stage 1 was put in for that reason.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Maintenance is a great area for energy performance improvement. It's something every auditor looks for. This is one of our happy hunting grounds. Happy hunting grounds occur in maintenance. They occur in continual improvement. Both of those are very happy hunting grounds. So when they improve something, when they do maintenance according to recommendations, it causes performance improvement. Sometimes they manage it better than the anticipated fail rate of the equipment. That is defined for the auditor as energy performance improvement. So my motor is supposed to die at 10 years. I kept this one running for 12. That's an energy performance improvement. So you've got to capture that information. It doesn't help with SEP, but it does with 50,001. So you got to think about that kind of thing. So this is a great place for improvement. Criteria, where might they get it from? Experience is the number one thing they get it from, but OEM recommendations is the other. They can pull this off the web. Don't let them say, I follow the OEM recommendations if they've never looked at the OEM recommendations. Because then I'm going to say, okay, fine, pull them up, and I'm gonna hold them to them. If they've never looked at them, they probably are not following them. Good hint, if they don't know where they are, they're probably not following them. Manuals, the chance of them following those depends on how deep the spider webs and dust level is. If there's no spider webs and dust on it, they might use it. If they're, thicker than I am tall, they're not using it. Found some really big roaches in those things too. So I don't open them. I make them open them. So I know there's no roaches in them. I don't do bugs and snakes. No, don't do bugs and snakes.
Is that a vanilla?
Yeah, that's a. Oh, that's really nice, Bubba. You open that one. And after you open it, I'll come look at it. You open it and find the page for me. They're usually expert, and they may have benchmarks from the OEM or from sister facilities on the equipment that they're using. They may use their history reports. That's very common in maintenance software. They'll use the breakdown reports to determine the performance and maintenance schedules. Common criteria, I don't think there's anything here you haven't seen. Temperature, pressure, time, humidity. All of these are very common. Weight in service industries, whatever they have. There are a number of different types of maintenance, and we'll leave it here as we break for lunch. See which ones you may have heard about. You can think about over lunch. Maintain reliability and availability is its main purpose. Energy efficiency is also now a purpose. So they're having to change their viewpoint of them. We have reactive maintenance, we have predictive maintenance, we have a variety of types of maintenance. We're going to talk about those and how they impact this program and how you might look at those as a CP. There's also an issue as a CP that's nice to understand in terms of where's the budget for these things coming from. Because sometimes you can help maintenance get more money to do things they want to do because it's in a different budget. And they like you then, and they'll do things for you. All right, so we will come back to this. We'll stop here, and we will go over for lunch. Same as yesterday. It's 12:20, about, 45 minutes.